If you've ever done psychedelics, then you've probably been asked this question before. What is it like? It's not an easy question to answer because no two experiences are going to be the same. And generally, it's hard for someone that hasn't done psychedelics to understand a psychedelic experience. But in this video, I'm going to share, based on my experiences, what you can expect from a mushroom therapy session. I'm not here to tell you to do mushrooms. I'm not here to convince you that you need to do mushrooms. I'm only here sharing experiences I've had and sort of a general expectation that someone might benefit from going into their session. So for starters, there is the logistics. Anytime I do this, I clear the entire day and I clear at least 2 full days after the session to recover. And when I say clear, I mean I don't even have plans to hang out with my friends. I don't have plans to do anything other than to rest and to be with myself and to try to integrate and to just feel whatever it is that I need to feel. If I'm doing mushrooms to heal, then I can expect that there will be a guide in the room with me. And what that person is there for primarily is to hold space. And that means that they are gonna take care of everything else while I go into this journey, into this experience, so that I don't have to worry about my safety or about anything. I can be completely present with the mushrooms. It also means that if something comes up for me, and I feel stuck, or I feel like I need some support, I feel like I need my hand held or a hug, then that person is going to be what you would call my empathic witness. Ideally, I don't talk to that person at all until after the session or until a week later when I have my integration session, which is kind of like a talk therapy session. And the reason that this is the ideal scenario is because the more I talk, the more that I engage with the world outside of myself, the more that I'm just distracting myself from the mushroom experience. And one of the things that's very common for psychedelic therapy sessions is to wear an eye mask for the duration of the session. And what this does is that it eliminates visual input so that I can go as deep into myself as possible. Some people choose to have music playing, whether that be like classical music or sort of shamanic music. What I've found is that music is good to get into a groove, and almost always at a certain point, I ask my guide to please turn the music off because music can get distracting after a certain point. So moving on to the trip itself. For mushrooms, the length is going to be anywhere from 5 to 7 hours, but really it's going to take the entire day to feel sort of sober again. And it's going to take several days after that, at least it has for me, to feel quote unquote normal. The mushrooms are going to bring up whatever I've been running from or hiding from or suppressing, which inherently, if you think about it, makes it a little bit difficult to know what to expect, right? Because you don't really know what it's going to bring up because you've been hiding it. And if you don't understand what's happening, and if you don't understand trauma and the way psychedelics work, that can be very scary. That's why I found it very useful to educate myself on these medicines, mushrooms specifically, and on trauma, just so that I could have a baseline of like what to expect. If I have a lot of trauma, which I do, a couple things might happen. I might feel like I'm reliving it. And the purpose of this is so that I can relive it with my guide as my empathic witness there to help me let go of the experience. So the way that works is that the only reason something becomes traumatic is because we go through it alone and we don't have anyone there to empathize with us. But, a brief example of how this showed up for me, this neglect, was feeling like I was back in my childhood home alone at like 3 years old on a Wednesday or a Saturday, and I didn't know where my parents were or when they were going to come back. And I felt scared and I felt unsafe and I felt sad. But because my shaman, my guide, was there to hold my hand and to tell me that they were there with me, then all of a sudden I am experiencing that painful situation again as if someone had been there to support me through it and to let go. Another thing that might happen is somatic release. So I actually sat for someone who this happened to, and they didn't know what that was. And they started to sort of freak out when their legs started to shake. And they asked me, hey, is it normal that my legs are shaking? Why is that happening? And the answer is yes, it is very normal. That's how the body releases trauma. One of the keys here for me has been to just breathe through it. That is, they say meditation, like come back to your breath, all that blah blah. When you're on mushrooms or on psychedelics, breathing has been what gets me through it. The third thing that might happen is resistance. I might feel an urge to talk to my guide or to distract myself in some way because of my fear of bringing these things up again and reliving them. When I tried to do mushrooms alone, what happened was that I had to pee every 10 or 15 minutes. And it's pretty hard to go deep into a mushroom trip if you're getting up every 15 minutes. But because I was alone and I didn't feel very safe, I put up those walls and I put up that resistance so that I wouldn't go that deep. But the best thing I've found here is to just sit with whatever it is and to, if I have to repeat this mantra just in my head. All feelings and all thoughts are welcome. I'm going to be okay, and it's good that these feelings are coming up. Another thing that happened to me was that I started to project a lot onto my shaman. So once we hit 5 p.m., which was the allotted time that I'd been given, all of a sudden I felt like I was encroaching on this person's life because it started to hit me around 4 and it was not anywhere near done, right? But instead of just communicating, hey, is it okay that we're going over time a little bit or whatever, right? Instead of communicating my needs, what I started to do was project the image of my mom or my dad onto her. So what I did was that I kind of shut down and I made the issue about her and not about I'm feeling like I'm encroaching. She hasn't said anything, because that's what I did for most of my life. Was I need to make sure that my parents are happy, because otherwise if they're not happy, they're responsible for me. What's going to happen then? Other possibilities that I have experienced myself are feeling like I've traveled back in time, which I mentioned, having a split consciousness, which goes hand in hand with the going back in time, right? I've had experiences where I feel simultaneously like I am in my childhood home, but I'm also 26 years old and I am doing perfectly fine and I'm safe here in Austin, Texas. But both of those things are happening at the same time. And so what that can start to feel like is that there is no time and it's all just kind of happening at once. I've felt overwhelming love. I've felt mental clarity. I've also felt mental fog and just like a jam of like, there's so much happening. There's so much input. I've even felt, the first therapeutic mushroom session I had, I felt this unburdening. And I just felt lighter and I felt like everything was gonna be okay. So after the trip, it's been different for me every time, right? The first time I did it, I felt perfectly fine and I felt great the next day and I was ready to move on and to just accept that I'd had this beautiful moment and this beautiful letting go of sadness. Second time, I felt nausea right after the trip. I felt a headache when I got home. I vomited in the middle of the night. I felt this just heavy sadness weighing down on me and blurring everything I was doing in my life. I felt a mental fog, right? I was trying to understand the things that had come up for me, but I just had to feel and not try to ascribe meaning to any of it yet. And I've also at times felt a strong desire to talk about my experiences and to share them with other people in the hopes that, you know, they will do it too, because it can feel so good that naturally I'm like, oh, I want my dad to do this, I want my mom to do this, I want everyone to do this to feel better. And what the best guides, the best literature will tell you is, do not do this. The best way to show somebody that this works and to quote unquote convince them to try it is to just live it and trust that they will notice the change if it's actually there. And on that note, it is also recommended that I don't try to process it with somebody else until at least a week after. Don't make any decisions, don't change your life around. Wait a week, and after a week, see how you feel, and then maybe if you want to, you can talk about it. So after the trip also comes integration. I define integration as simply making different choices. And what that looks like is, you know, given the possible new perspective that the mushrooms might present us with, am I going to act on that, or am I just going to pretend that never happened and live my life the exact same way that I have been? And what I've found is that in order to make those changes, I first have to feel the corresponding emotions. So that means, you know, if I have a mushroom ceremony and during the ceremony I am shown, let's say, that my job is this very inhuman, just draining, whatever, right? And it's just an example. Before I go and quit that job and decide to pursue my life dreams, I have to feel the sadness and the pain that I put myself in this situation. And why did I put myself in this situation? Maybe I had this modeled to me by my dad when I was a little kid, or maybe, you know, whatever the reason might be for you. I have to feel that before I can act on it, which means that it's gonna get a lot harder before it gets easier. So think about, you know, somebody that's in a relationship that they're not happy in anymore. Maybe they're in an abusive relationship. It takes a while of feeling the reality and the pain of that abuse to A, accept it, to B, then do something about it, and to C, then start to rebuild. It does not get easier until a little bit after I've started to rebuild. And this is the most important point of this entire video. If I am not ready to act on these perspectives and these lessons that I will be shown, then I probably don't want to do mushrooms, because all it's going to do is show me that I'm fooling myself. Some integration practices that help are nature walks, meditation, journaling, creative expression, sauna and cold plunge, physical exercise, you know, support groups, therapy, anything that helps me tune into myself and process what happened. And now one of the risks with doing any psychedelic therapy outside of the physical and sort of health risks is spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass basically means I am skipping the part where I feel all of the emotions that I had been suppressing. So in other words, not doing anything with the new perspective I was given. So again, going back to integration, if I am shown that maybe the relationship or the job that I'm in aren't healthy for me anymore, but then I don't actually go and do anything about that or feel those emotions, and then 2 months later I go and do another medicine session, that is called spiritual bypass. And it is very prevalent in the psychedelic community, the spiritual community. I know so many people that are ready to just, whether it's psychedelics or not, they're just always doing a retreat. They're going on this experience. They're doing psychedelics. They're doing all these things, and their life is still just kind of chaotic, and they're unreliable, and they're not that trustworthy. And that to me is way more frightening than anything that psychedelics could bring up. Because basically I would be living a lie, I would be a fraud. Some final thoughts on what you can expect. There are going to be people who do this and who tell you that you need to do this as well, that you should do this. Don't listen to those people. Only do this if you feel like you are called to do this, and do it because you want to create change in your life and because you're tired of the way that you've been living, not because you're curious about what the experience itself will be like. Make sure you do it with a professional, a trained professional, not somebody that just says they're a professional. And even more important than them being a professional is how you feel when you're with them. Do you trust this person? Are they prepared? Are they equipped to help you move through potentially very painful emotions? And last but not least is have integration practices already built into your life. So don't wait until after you do your medicine session to, okay, now I'm going to start journaling. Now I'm going to start exercising. It's like, no, create a life that will, in and of itself, be able to hold space for whatever the medicine session brings, because otherwise, it's not easy to start all these practices. They're habits, and habits take time. And after a medicine session, generally speaking, you're going to be in a very sort of turmoil time. So it helps if these are already things I'm doing and not things I'm going to start doing. But anyway, I hope this video helps or touches you in some way. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you next time.